The wooden basket looked ordinary except for the top bands painted white and every other side band coated in a light orange. It had wire handles on each side, an old apple or peach basket, light enough for one person to carry. Inside, it held typical office trash, loose papers and scraps from her small office. "Charles, you and Morgan take this basket down to the incinerator, empty it, and come straight back. I've got another errand for you both," Miss Reynolds ordered. "Got it, Miss Reynolds," Liam answered quickly for both of us. Neither of us wanted the task, but there was no way out. A few clouds dotted the warm sky. The rest of the guys were prepping to head down to the boathouse to change and swim, but Miss Reynolds picked Liam and me to handle the trash. We knew by the time we finished and changed, we'd miss a good chunk of swimming. Liam knew it too, but Miss Reynolds didn't care and picked us over the others. Liam was just a year older and much taller. My head barely reached his shoulders. Both of us were in a rush, but he naturally walked faster. "Come on, Morgan," he shouted as I struggled to keep pace. "You want to swim, right? You're going too fast." I snapped, annoyed he was yelling. Before I could react, probably because I was too slow, Liam yanked the basket, pulling the handle out of my hand. Most of the papers spilled out in a heap at our feet. "You idiot," he yelled. "Stupid jerk," he added, as we scrambled to gather the scattered trash. It didn't take long to collect the papers, and we set off again without a word. He was angry I was slow, I was mad he was a bully. Mostly, we were both upset because we'd missed swimming. The incinerator was a long walk down an old dirt road past the girls' dorm. It had been there for years, everyone knew it. Sometimes, taking the trash there was a break, a chance to be alone. Not this time. We resented the chore. Someone had been there recently, the metal door was still hot. Liam handed me a stick to open it. I pushed the lever and pried the door open with its usual creak. No fire blazed inside, but the heat was intense. The ashes showed a big fire had burned just before. "Open it all the way!" Liam shouted from behind. Okay. With the door wide open, I felt the heat and stepped aside as Liam picked up the basket and tossed it, papers and all, into the incinerator. "Why'd you do that?" I shouted, alarmed. Liam looked confused. "Miss Reynolds wants her basket back," I reminded him. Realizing his mistake, Liam quickly reached in, grabbed the basket, and dumped it with some of the papers outside the incinerator. "Come on, Morgan, help me out," he urged. We hurried to gather the papers again, some blown near the creek by the breeze. Once we'd collected as many as we could, we threw them back in, shut the door, and headed back to Miss Reynolds' office. After emptying the incinerator, I carried the basket back, both of us hurrying up the old road, silent except for the thought of missing out on swimming. I couldn't keep up with Liam's pace, and soon he was well ahead, but he slowed down when I caught up. That mischievous smile crossed his face, the one that said he was glad I'd remembered Miss Reynolds wanted her basket back and hadn't let him burn it. We'd have been in big trouble if I hadn't. Without a word, he reached over and ruffled my hair roughly. It was just playful, and I knew it was his way of saying thanks. Most older guys, like Liam, kept their hair short in crew cuts. A few of us, like me, had longer hair because our moms wanted it that way. Sometimes the others teased me, one of Liam's bigger friends called me Mop Top, another said I looked like his baby sister. A few even called me a sissy. I was used to it and shrugged it off, I liked my hair just fine. Just before we reached the building near the girls' dorm, Liam took the basket from me. "I'll carry it," he said, pulling it from my hands. As we walked, he brushed off dirt it had picked up from the incinerator and the ground. "Hey Liam, look," I said, pointing at the swings nearby. "So?" he asked, already guessing what I meant. "Those swings are for girls, dummy," he said, walking on. Ignoring him, I went over to the swings anyway. There were about 6, each with worn wooden seats hanging from thick ropes tied to a metal pole 8 or 10 feet high. Beyond them were 3 wooden teeter-totters. "Come on, Morgan," Liam called. "You want to go swimming, right?" he asked again when I didn't answer. "Yeah, but I just want to try these for a minute," I shouted back, climbing onto the nearest swing and pushing off. Knowing I wouldn't change my mind, Liam set down the basket and got on a swing at the far end. Soon, we were having fun, seeing who could swing the highest. Liam was good. He quickly swung much higher than I ever thought possible, and I gave up trying to keep up. For a while, I just enjoyed the breeze blowing through my hair as I swung back and forth. Without warning, a loud voice behind us shattered the moment. "What do you two think you're doing?" she demanded. The voice startled both of us. We struggled to stop swinging and got off safely, turning to face the speaker. It was Miss Turner, the girls' dean. Tall, strong, and intimidating, she looked like she could overpower most men. None of the boys had ever met her up close, though we'd seen her from a distance when teachers and matrons gathered. Everyone knew the girls feared her, and now we'd find out why. "I asked you a question," she snapped. "Who said you two could play on the girls' swings?" We were in trouble. The school kept boys and girls separate except in classes. The girls had their own playground. It was off limits to boys. "Come here," she ordered. Like Liam, I wanted to run, but where? Miss Turner grabbed both our arms and started leading us away. "That's Miss Reynolds's basket, isn't it?" she asked as we passed it, and without slowing down, she told Liam, who was closest, to pick it up. Liam kept pace easily, but I stumbled a couple of times. Still, Miss Turner never let go of my arm or broke stride, half dragging me toward the girls' dorm building where her office was. At the front door, she let go of Liam's arm and had him open it. But she kept a firm grip on mine, pulling me right behind her. Neither of us had been inside the girls' building before. It was newer than ours, but the same cleaning supplies gave it the familiar smell. "Wait here, you two," she ordered as we stopped in front of a glass-enclosed office just inside the door. "Good afternoon, Miss Turner," several girls said together as she entered. Liam and I stayed quiet, knowing we were in trouble, though not sure what was coming. When she returned, she snapped, "Down there, you two," pointing to the dim hallway on our left. "The last door on the right," she added, following close behind. Liam bent to pick up the basket, but she barked, "Leave it. You can get it on the way back." As we walked, I glanced back and saw a girl's face peeking from the office doorway. "Keep your eyes forward," Miss Turner commanded. I obeyed. Terrified, we said nothing. Miss Turner stayed silent as we walked down the dark hallway. "Inside. Quickly. Move it. Both of you," she ordered sharply at the last door. Liam opened it, and we stepped inside with Miss Turner right behind us, pressing close. Without looking, she flipped on the lights and closed the door. It looked like her office, a large wooden desk to the right and a long sofa against the other wall, with a door beside it. "Get undressed," she demanded. Neither of us moved. "Take off your shirts and pants, both of you." Her voice was furious. I couldn't believe it. Was she serious? "You heard me," she said, angrier now. She was clearly used to immediate obedience, but Liam and I were shocked. Why did we have to undress in an office? What was she planning? Because I was small for my age, I often wore short pants like the younger kids, a fact I hated. Now, I definitely didn't want to take them off in front of Miss Turner. But too scared to resist, we started undressing. She watched us for a moment to make sure we complied, then walked over to the door beside the couch and went inside. She returned quickly, holding a woman's hairbrush with a long wooden handle. Just then, a light knock came at the outer office door. "Come in," Miss Turner called as Liam and I, already finished undressing, stood in the middle of the room folding our shirts and pants. Two girls about our age, both nearly as tall as Liam, entered silently. They went straight to Miss Turner, smiling widely as they glanced at us standing there in our underwear. Miss Turner stood with her arms crossed, saying nothing for a moment. Then, without a word, she pointed at us. The girls, clearly knowing the routine, understood immediately. The smaller girl approached me, holding what I first thought was a faded light blue shirt. She had me raise my arms, and before I could react, she slipped it over my head. She moved so quickly and quietly, I had no chance to say or do anything. She turned me around and fastened a few small buttons at the back by my neck. It was a little girl's lightweight summer dress, a floaty, light blue dress, almost infantile in style, like the ones younger girls at school sometimes wore. It had short puffy sleeves ending in elastic ruffles, a thin, worn lace trim in white, medium blue, and yellow circling the bodice just under my chest. The hem stopped halfway between my knees and hips. It was the kind of dress meant to make little girls look cute, something any little sissy would dread having to wear. While she finished dressing me, Miss Turner and the other girl did the same to Liam. I saw how ashamed he was as he stood there in a light yellow and white gingham dress, the same style many of the older girls wore in summer. He looked humiliated as the girl behind him buttoned the dress up and tied a bow at his lower back. Facing me, Liam seemed on the verge of tears. "Well, don't you two look just darling," Miss Turner said sarcastically as the girls made us turn to face her. Liam began to cry, but she ignored it. "Now," Miss Turner said, "what did Miss Reynolds tell you when she gave you that basket of trash to take to the incinerator?" Neither of us answered or moved, we were too scared. "She told you to come right back, didn't she asked, looking at me. "But you didn't, did you?" she added with a strange smile, glancing at Liam before continuing. "All the girls, except these two," she said, quickly looking to her left and right, "are supposed to be upstairs at sewing lessons, then back at me, or in art class, not playing on the swings where I found you two. So I'm going to show you what happens to girls here who skip class." She pointed at me. "You, come here." Frightened, ashamed, and sorry, I obeyed slowly. Miss Turner had moved over to her desk, pushing things aside, waiting. When I stood before her, she looked me over briefly, then motioned toward the large couch on the other side of the room. "I think I'll take you over my knee," she said. It was one of the worst humiliations I'd ever faced. Being dressed like a little sissy was bad enough, but now with Miss Turner sitting on the thick padded arm of the couch, I knew exactly what was coming. Everyone in the room knew too, I was about to get a spanking. Like a small child, like a helpless sissy, Miss Turner was going to spank me over her knees. When I reached her, she half pushed, half pulled me across her skirt. I lay there for a moment before feeling a tug on my dress as she pulled the hem all the way up my back. I couldn't see what she was doing, but then I felt her start pulling my underpants down. The humiliation hit me like a wall, they were pulled down all the way to my knees. "The swings where I found you two are for girls only," she said firmly. "And since you skipped your classes today, you're about to learn what happens to disobedient little girls here." With one hand steadying me on her knees, I felt her shift slightly, and then I heard it. Then I felt it. At first, it was a shock. Then came the burning pain. I jumped and kicked, but Miss Turner was strong and had me right where she wanted me. The second swat was worse than the first. I cried out, promising I wouldn't do it again, hoping for mercy. "Believe me, when I'm done with you, you and your friend will think twice before skipping class again," she said. The third was even harsher, and the fourth worse still. I lost count of how many times she struck me with that long hairbrush. By the time she let me stand, tears streamed down my face. My behind burned like fire but also felt numb in waves. Despite the tears, I saw my underpants bunched just above my knees under the short dress. Miss Turner let me pull them back up, and I was more than glad to. I don't remember much after that, except hearing Liam getting his spanking by the desk. Like me, he soon cried. I think she was harder on him, his behind was bright red before she finished. As Liam pulled his underpants up, Miss Turner, straightening her skirt, told one of the girls, "Give that big sissy a tissue to dry his eyes and blow his nose." The taller girl handed him a tissue, and as he stopped crying, Miss Turner dismissed the girls. "Okay, you two can go," she said. Before the door closed, both girls looked back with big smiles. Like Liam, I was too crushed to say or do anything but stand there. "Now," Miss Turner said, do you two know what happens to those who skip class here? In a moment, you'll be taken upstairs to finish your lessons for today. Too humiliated and ashamed to speak or move, Liam and I just stood there, unsure of what to do. Miss Turner went over to her desk, tidied up after spanking Liam, then picked up the phone. From the brief, one-sided conversation, we knew she was calling Miss Reynolds. She ended it with, "I'll keep them here until close to supper, then I'll bring them back." Supper time? It wasn't even noon. After hanging up, she led us out of the office and back down the hallway. When we passed the first office she'd entered, she told us to wait and went back inside briefly. A girl followed her out and headed down the hallway we'd come from. "This way, girls," Miss Turner said, pushing our shoulders and making us walk ahead. Near the front door, just before exiting, we turned and went up the stairs. Neither Liam nor I said a word, and Miss Turner behind us stayed silent as well. Halfway down the second-floor hallway, we heard voices, the hum of sewing machines, and the cheerful chatter of little kids. "In there, you two," Miss Turner said, pointing to a large open room on the left. We entered at the back of the room, filled with girls sitting two to a desk, about 24 desks, each with a sewing machine. Like Liam, most girls wore dresses, light yellow, green, or blue, like mine. At the front was a woman dressed in a white blouse and dark blue skirt, her short reddish hair pulled into a tight bun much like Miss Turner. She was clearly the teacher. "I have another one for you, Miss Hayes," Miss Turner called, pointing at Liam. Some girls turned and giggled when they saw us. Then others turned too, curious about the laughter. I wanted to disappear. "That's enough, girls," Miss Hayes clapped her hands, restoring order. "Back to your sewing." Trying not to laugh out loud, most of the girls turned back to their machines with hands covering their mouths. Miss Hayes approached us, exchanged a quiet word with Miss Turner, then took Liam by the arm and led him to sit beside a girl near the middle of the room who had a sewing machine all to herself. I felt awful for him, he must have been beyond embarrassed. "You, come with me," Miss Turner said, touching my shoulder. Like a child, she took my hand and led me out. Across the hall was another room. Though the doors were closed, the sounds of many little kids came through. Miss Turner opened the door and ushered me inside. Once again, I found myself standing at the back of a classroom about the same size as the sewing room, but this was art class for little girls. The teacher, standing behind and leaning over two girls at a long table, looked up as we entered. She left the girls briefly to come over after Miss Turner signaled her with a wave. About as tall as Miss Turner but younger, Miss Wells wore a style like mine, with short brunette hair that gave her a cute tomboy look. Her warm smile assured me that although I had to wear a dress like the others, spending time in art class with her wouldn't be so bad, unlike Liam, who was stuck with sewing lessons. "And who do we have here?" she asked as she approached. "Tracy, I want to keep this little sissy here for the rest of your class today. Can you handle that?" Miss Turner asked, looking down at me. For a moment, Miss Wells said nothing as she studied me. Maybe my unisex haircut threw her off at first. She looked puzzled, but then it clicked. When I looked up, she could tell I'd been crying recently. "Oh, I see now," she said softly, reaching out to take my hands in hers. "Of course. We'd be happy to have another little artist join us," she told Miss Turner with a bright smile and genuine warmth. "Good. I'll leave this one in your care, Tracy. There's another older one in Miss Hayes's room, and if you could take her there at the end of your class to wait for me, I'd appreciate it," Miss Turner said. Miss Wells nodded without taking her eyes off me, and Miss Turner turned and left, closing the door behind her. "Well, sweetheart," Miss Wells asked kindly, "what's your name?" "Morgan," I answered, still embarrassed and close to tears again. "Morgan? That's a lovely name," she said after a moment. Then added, "What were you punished for, Morgan?" "We were playing on the girls' swings," I told her, feeling sorry for myself, something she clearly noticed. "Well," she said, releasing one of my hands, "I bet you won't do that again, will you?" She already knew the answer. I just shook my head. "Do you like to draw or paint, Morgan?" she asked, leading me to the end of the long table where a couple of girls were watching us. "Yes," I replied honestly. She probably saw the truth in my voice. "Grace, Ava, this is Morgan," Miss Wells introduced me to the two girls at the table. "Morgan will be joining us today, so why don't you show her what you're working on, okay?" Grace was a bit younger than most girls in the sewing room across the hall and not much taller than me. She wore the same kind of dress they all did over there, the kind Liam had to wear. I noticed about half a dozen girls in the room dressed like her. Ava, who barely reached my shoulders, had long brown hair tied into pigtails with thin pink ribbons. She wore a faded pink dress similar to mine. Most of the girls wore nearly identical, almost childlike dresses, some light green, some tan or yellow, a few like mine in light blue. It seemed designed so teachers could easily tell the big girls from the little girls. With Grace acting like a big sister, Ava, a few others, and I spent the afternoon drawing and making cutouts to show Miss Wells. When it was time for watercolors, Grace made me stand still so she could put a large smock on me to protect my dress. We mostly had fun, and the afternoon flew by. I'm not sure what happened to Liam that day, but aside from the shock of wearing a dress for the first time and getting spanked over Miss Turner's knees, thanks to Miss Wells, Grace, and the others I met in art class, it really wasn't so bad. When the 5 o'clock bell rang, I was disappointed class was over. We were having a great time. After helping me take off the smock and clean up, the older girls like Grace led the others downstairs to the girls' playground, the last place I wanted to go. Miss Wells told me to wait by her desk, finished tidying up, then came over to me. She had to look up to meet my eyes, but when she took my hands in hers and stooped down, she asked, "Morgan, honey, I watched you in class today. I think you had a nice time. Didn't you?" I told her I did, and as Miss Wells straightened the slightly twisted hem of my short dress, she said, "I'm glad you enjoyed my class. I saw some of your drawings, honey, they were very pretty. If you ever want to come back, I'd be happy to have you." Then she stood up. As she took my hand, I started to ask, but hesitated. "Miss Wells?" "Yes, honey," she replied, waiting for me to finish. "Will I have to wear a dress if I come back to your class?" I asked, half afraid. "Only if you want to, honey," she said softly, the voice I'll always remember. "Only if you want to." When she led me back across the hall to Miss Hayes's room, Liam was standing alone at the back, looking miserable. It was clear he'd had a rough afternoon. "Hi, Liam," I called out cheerfully as I slipped my hand free from Miss Wells's and walked over. "What's got you so happy?" he half sneered. For a moment, forgetting where we were, I wanted to tell him about the wonderful time I'd had all afternoon, but then reality hit again. Miss Wells waved goodbye and left. I wanted to follow her but couldn't, so I waved back. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Miss Hayes watching me. She glanced at Miss Wells, then back at me, and both smiled slightly. "You two wait outside in the hall," Miss Hayes instructed. "Miss Turner will be along shortly to take you back to where you belong." Soon, Miss Turner appeared and after a quick word with Miss Hayes, she came over. "All right, you two, let's go see Miss Reynolds. She's waiting in her office." On the way back to the boys' dorm, we passed several older guys. Before they reached us, one of the taller ones recognized Liam. "Hey, Liam." "Hi, cutie," he teased loudly. "Oh dear, you just look so sweet," the same guy mocked in a fake girl's voice, causing laughter. "We went swimming today." "What did you do?" "Make dresses or play with your dolls all afternoon?" another called, sparking more laughter. "The other one's a boy too," someone added. "There's 2 of them. Both sissies." More laughter followed. Miss Turner turned to them sharply. "This is what happens if you're caught on the girls' side playing on their swings," she said loudly and firmly. They fell silent and kept walking, though there was some snickering as they passed. I know Liam and Miss Turner heard it. Inside the building, Miss Turner led us straight to Miss Reynolds' office on the first floor. She handed Miss Reynolds a small brown paper bag and said, "Here are the sissies I told you about, and their clothes." Miss Reynolds looked at us for a moment. "Didn't I tell you to come straight back?" she asked. Neither of us said anything. "Well, didn't I?" she repeated, expecting a response. "Yes, Miss Reynolds," we answered together, sounding like the girls Miss Turner usually dealt with. "See what happens when you don't listen?" she said without waiting for an answer. "Go wait out in the hall," she ordered after a moment's silence. "I want to speak to Mrs. Turner alone." We obeyed. After a minute or two, Miss Turner came out, glanced at us with a brief smile, said nothing, and walked right out of the building. Liam and I waited outside Miss Reynolds' office until nearly dinner time. It might have been half an hour or a bit longer, but it felt like forever. Miss Reynolds came and went a few times without saying a word. We just stood there, hoping for something, anything, that would end the shame of being dressed like sissies. Several times while running errands, some of our friends passed by Miss Reynolds' office, and Liam and I had to endure more humiliating looks and jokes. Finally, just before dinner, Miss Reynolds returned from being out and ushered us back into her office. She handed us our clothes, telling us to change. It was kind of nice to put on my short pants again, but even though I'd never admitted to Liam, any of my friends, or certainly not Miss Reynolds or anyone like her, I didn't want to change out of my dress. Like me, Liam needed help with the buttons on the back of his dress. Since he was closer and clearly in a hurry, Miss Reynolds helped him first. While I struggled to reach a few buttons, the phone on her desk rang. She spent a few minutes on the call, long enough for Liam to get fully changed. Liam wouldn't help me, so I had to wait until Miss Reynolds finished. After hanging up, she sent Liam out on an errand, and as he left, he tossed his yellow dress over the nearest chair. Finally, Miss Reynolds helped me out of my dress. While I changed, she folded the two dresses. It took her about as long to fold them as it took me to get changed. Then she placed the dresses into the same brown paper bag Miss Turner had brought our clothes in when she returned us to Miss Reynolds' office. Now dressed, Miss Reynolds told me to take the bag and the dresses back to the girls' dorm. On the way, when I was sure no one was around, I stopped several times to peek inside the bag and look at the dress I'd worn most of the day. Neatly folded on top of Liam's dress, it still looked more like a little girl's blouse than a dress. As strange as it seemed at the time, I thought about taking it out and hiding it so I wouldn't have to return it, so I could keep it to wear again someday. Unlike the other girls in art class that day, I knew I wasn't a little girl. But over the years, I sometimes fantasized that if Miss Reynolds or Miss Wells ever needed a little boy to help out in art class and had to wear a dress, I wanted it to be me. Don't forget to join me on Patreon for exclusive content.